Fancy winning a copy of this one? Well, just let me know down in the comments what you make of it. Does it tickle your fancy or not? I'll be pinging out at least 2 codes for this one. A thanks to the publisher who sponsored this episode. Today we're looking at Guayota. Apologies for the pronunciation, but it's a 3D adventure game that features heavy puzzle elements and dungeons that clearly take some inspiration from Zelda, but this Spanish dev team was also clearly inspired by the legends related to the Canary Islands and its mythology. Oh, and there's a completely free demo you can download to check it out, and there's also a sale on, which I'll tell you about. Is it going to light your fire or leave you in the dark? Well, my name's Mark Walker, welcome back to SwitchUp. Now let's find out. Firstly, let's talk about narrative, because it's quite important here. I did mention it focuses on the mythos surrounding the Canary Islands, and the story follows a group of explorers sent by the Spanish kingdom to find the legendary St. Brendan's Island, and you join them as a mysterious protagonist to uncover this place's mythology. Thankfully, all is not as it seems, and as you explore these tombs solving their puzzles, you unlock manuscripts from one of 2 realms, which we'll talk about in a minute. And these do a nice job of gradually telling you the tale. But what's also cool is that you can actually explore the game in a slightly non-linear fashion, so the order in which you collect those may change slightly, and if you want to find everything out, you have to push into some of the harder puzzles. But it doesn't force you to do that, which is nice. So then let's start with the island. You begin your adventure with a group of other travelers, and I headed off to the northernmost temple. This took me on a rather scenic walk up the mountains, and upon entering, I lit the first torch and was presented with a series of doors. Now, how the game works is, you can see some symbols on the ground by each door, one that looks like a sun and one like, a purple sun. Basically, these represent 2 different planes of existence, the real world and the plane of madness. Now, upon entering an open doorway, a bit like the Crystal Maze, you're transported into a room with a puzzle. This is a large area that focuses heavily on the use of light and dark. Firstly, each of the 3 temples has a very different mechanics, which was a very good idea. But secondly, both the real and the corrupt world present the same layout map with a completely different puzzle and style of puzzle, which is a really clever idea. The reason it's clever is because if you fail on the real world puzzle and you're able to complete the evil world puzzle, which doesn't actually cost you any lives, there's no damage in that area, but it is potentially a little more cerebral, well, you only have to do 1 to progress. Now let's start off with the real world. Here in the first temple, you'll be trying to avoid hazards, things like spikes on the ground, spinning blades, and the end door is usually accessible right from the get-go. And what's shown on it are the number of torches that have to be lit. To do that, you'll pick up glowing stones and move them around. Sounds straightforward enough. In the real world, it's 50-50 difficulty between environmental hazards and the puzzling itself, with my old man reflexes struggling a little bit on the former of those things. A key mechanic here is basically placing these glowing stones next to the pillars, and for each pillar that you've got lit up, it will raise bridges within the map. 1 symbol means 1 lit pillar, and that's important because early on I thought that the nearest pillar to the bridge was what was raising it, but actually it's just that total number, and that's actually shown up here in the corner. As soon as that clicks, these puzzles really begin to flow, and they're very well designed. If you do succumb to your wounds, and you can actually replenish your health once over here, but if you do die, you may well awake in the plane of madness. This is quite cool. It has a nice art style, a different effect, and you no longer have to worry about dying, but my word, the puzzles are trickier. I actually preferred this because in a puzzle game I like to just puzzle. I don't really want to do combat and things like that, and I think it's very clever that they kept the same layout with very different mechanics. For example, these solid walls, when you pass through them, they become transparent. That allows light to pass through, but you can't go back through them unless you dash. However, if you do that, it sets off an explosion that resets all of that color within the area. It means you have to really plan out where you're going, exactly what it's going to be like when you reach it. And as far as puzzle design goes, this is very strong indeed. As you complete these, you unlock different doors from what's essentially a hub area within each temple, and once unlocked, it'll allow you to move on to the next ones. When a whole temple's puzzles are completed, and bear in mind you don't have to finish the real world and the plane of madness puzzles, it's one or the other, or both if you really want to go and find all of the lore, then you can move on to the next temple. The temples are located in the north, east and west, and they each have different themes. One of them you pass through a desert area, and its mechanics are entirely different. I was really happy to see them do that. Here you can actually swing your torch around, lighting torches momentarily, and it's much more about precise timing, but not too precise. In the other, it's a more lush jungle area, again tied to these legendary deities, and once again the mechanics change. You're almost creating sequences using those glowing stones with a formula going on that you need to work out as to what is raising your total to again open those doors. So it keeps some core mechanics such as opening up areas to move on to the next, to eventually reach that piece of lore at the end of each stage, which I do think was a good idea. So it is very much a puzzle game. You won't be fighting enemies in between the areas. The island is more for exploration and chatting to your companions who will give you more details and progress the story that way. And it is single player only as well. Although it's not a review, there are a couple of little negatives that I'd say. Things like the spikes perhaps coming up just a little bit too fast. But really, if you're a fan of this genre, the bit that matters, the puzzling, is very well done and not frustrating. Now when it goes to visuals and performance, well, we're looking at a 30 FPS target. I did notice a couple of dips here and there, but it tends to maintain that, particularly in dungeons, which is the important part. The visuals are quite interesting, certainly between the different areas, but the star of the show is the lighting engine. In a game that focuses on light and dark and moving that around to solve puzzles, thankfully the real-time and dynamic lights work very well. One minor visual gripe that I do have with the experience is just when the character leaves one area and enters the next. When you're exploring the island, and the direction he's facing can make it a bit confusing at first as to where you need to go next. Normally your back faces the exit, so you know that if you keep going in the direction the character's facing, then you'll be fine, but sometimes you'll just be facing at an off angle. The soundtrack is really enjoyable. I'm not entirely sure who worked on the music here, but it's very fitting. There's a nice mixture of styles, but it also leans on ambience when it needs to. As for price then, well, we're looking at £12.14 currently with a 10% discount until August the 22nd, and I believe this is Team Delusion's first game on Switch. And as I mentioned at the start, there is also a demo, so if you're not entirely sure if the gameplay is going to be for you, click the links, go check out the demo. And as I said at the start as well, we are going to be giving away a copy of this one, so if it intrigues you, let me know what you think down in the comments. If you've tried the demo, also let other people know what you think of it, and we'll announce those in a community post. This really is the epitome of a small indie team with just a handful operating out of Madrid. We've had some great indie games out of the Spanish teams, Moonlighter, which is one of my favorites of all time. So it's great to see even more teams popping up. And on SwitchUp, that's exactly what we like to support. Thank you to our Patreons, our members, all of you that enjoy the content. If you've got any questions about the game as well, then do leave them down below and I'll do my very best to answer those. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it SwitchUp. Cheers guys, see ya!